How powerful is Javelin anti-tank missile? The US-made FGM-148 Javelin is one of the premier portable anti-tank missile systems in the world. It's also an expensive piece of kit, with each missile typically costing more than the targets it eliminates. Still, the infrared-guided Javelin has proven itself in combat in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria, and has reliable shtick that should work on virtually any tank out there. It hits them on the weak top armor. It also exposes its crew to less danger than the typical guided missile system. Because it's such a lightweight system, it may end up being a first responder on the ground to emergencies that could be described as massive, unexpected tank invasions. A scenario the U.S. military could have faced during Operation Desert Shield when it deployed light infantry to defend Saudi Arabia and currently fears in the Baltics. The Javelin is so effective that who the United States sells or gives Javelins to has become a political issue on more than one occasion. Within the U.S. military, the Javelin also looks set to transition from being purely an infantry system to being mounted on vehicles. So, how does one throw these anti-tank spears? And why are they so powerful? The Javelin doesn't look as sleek and deadly as its name would have you think. It resembles a clunky dumbbell slightly over 1 meter in length. Fortunately, you don't need good looks to blow up a tank. The Javelin's Command Launch Unit, CLU, has a sophisticated infrared sensor with multiple viewing modes, including 4x optical zoom, a 4x green-lit thermal view, a 12x narrow vision zoom activated for targeting. The seeker in the missile even provides a fourth 9x thermal viewing mode. The CLU can therefore serve as a handy scanning device for the infantry. The thermal viewers on the Javelin need to be cooled off to function well, which theoretically takes 30 seconds, but might take a bit longer if you're in Baghdad and it's a breezy 120 degrees at noon. The system also incorporates multiple safeguards to avert or abort accidental launch. The CLU, when loaded with a missile, weighs in at 50 pounds. Most of the weight comes from the missile and can be fired from a crouch or even seated position. That's a lot lighter than the wire-guided tow or other long-range missiles that typically required a heavy tripod. Still, it's not exactly something you'd want to run a marathon with. Once the firer acquires a target, locks the infrared seeker onto it, and pulls the trigger, the Javelin missile is ejected out of the CLU without using its rocket motor in soft launch, creating relatively little backblast. Missile launch backblast not only makes it easy for opposing forces to spot the launcher after firing, but can make launching while inside a confined space, a building, a deadly risk. So the Javelin's small backblast is very handy for keeping the operator alive. Still, the launch does blow back some gas, so you don't want to stand directly behind it. Afterwards, the Javelin's gunner the gunner could play Candy Crush on their cell phone if they wanted to, because unlike most long-range anti-tank missiles, the Javelin is a fire-and-forget system and requires no further input after launch. The Javelin crew is free to duck into cover and concealment rather than being forced to remain fixed in place guiding the missile toward the target, as is necessary with semi-automatic command line-of-sight SACLOS systems such as the wire-guided tow or laser-guided AT-14 Cornet. After launch, a Javelin shoots forward horizontally for a second before its rocket motor ignites and it climbs up 150 meters into the air, known as a curveball shot. It's quite a sight. The missile's infrared seeker, benefiting from gyroscopes and gimbals, makes adjustments using thrusters to ensure its trajectory leads it to plunge almost vertically into the infrared signature it was locked onto. A Javelin fired in this manner will strike the top armor of an armored vehicle, which is generally much thinner than the frontal or even side armor. The Javelin 127mm shaped charge warhead is estimated to penetrate the equivalent of 600 to 800 millimeters of rolled hardened armor, RHA, which is not particularly impressive given that modern tanks now feature composite armor that is extra effective against such warheads. But that really doesn't matter. It's still more than enough to penetrate the top armor of anything out there, at least as long as we don't consider other defensive systems. One common defense, which sometimes does reinforce top armor, is explosive reactive armor, ERA, a layer of explosive bricks covering a tank intended to prematurely detonate the shaped charges used by missiles. However, the Javelin has a tandem charge warhead designed to defeat ERA using a precursor charge at the front of the warhead to take out the local ERA brick, blasting open a gap through which the main warhead can hit the tank's conventional armor. The Javelin can also be fired in direct attack mode, useful for hitting targets that are too close for the top attack or that benefit from top cover, like a bunker or cave entrance. The direct fire mode could also be effective against low-flying helicopters. One of the Javelin's few limitations is its range, 2.5 kilometers. Though adequate for most combat situations, older missiles like the TOW or Cornet boast ranges of 5 kilometers or more. So, do they actually work? The Javelin was designed in the 70s and 80s when the leaders of the U.S. military had nightmares about being overrun by endless hordes of Soviet tanks, a fear worsened by the generally poor performance of the M47 Dragon missile in use at the time. However, the Javelin finally entered service in the U.S. military in 1996 after the Cold War had ended and first saw action in 2003 during the U.S. invasion of Iraq. At the time, the United States was not able to deploy troops to northern Iraq by land, so instead it airdropped special forces and paratroopers that fought alongside Kurdish Peshmerga fighters. In the Battle of Debeka Pass, a force of a few dozen special forces operators and a larger Peshmerga contingent engaged and destroyed an Iraqi mechanized company of over 100 soldiers. The U.S. force had just 4 Javelin launch units, 19 Javelin missiles were fired, 17 of which hit, destroying 2 T-55 tanks, 8 MT-LB armored personnel carriers, and several trucks. Reportedly, all of the Javelin shots were made at 2,200 meters range or further, close to or exceeding the official maximum range of the weapon, and one hit was even reported at 4,200 meters. Javelins knocked out several more tanks during the Iraq War, including Type 69 tanks and Lion of Babylon T-72s, none of them cutting-edge types. As the conventional phase of the conflict ended, the Javelin's main duty soon came to sniping smaller, softer targets. The Javelin's precise targeting scope was ideal for spotting and taking out at long ranges insurgent heavy weapons teams armed with machine guns, missiles, or recoilless rifles, as well as the occasional pickup truck. Other weapon systems available to the infantry lack the combination of long range and precision. The future of the Javelin. The Javelin has undergone quite a few upgrades since initial deployment in 1996. Let's take a look at 3 of the most important ones. Given that the Javelin has been used primarily to hit soft targets and structures, a new version of the Javelin warhead with a deadlier blast fragmentation has been introduced. Designated as the FGM-148 this new warhead is supposedly just as effective against tanks and no costlier than its predecessors. Finally, a new extended-range Javelin has been recently tested, capable of hitting targets up to 4.5 kilometers away. This is significant, as one of the chief rationales for keeping the TOW missile as the standard vehicle-mounted anti-tank weapon was its longer range of nearly 5 kilometers. A long-range Javelin would seem to be superior. In any case, the Javelin missile remains one of the United States' most potent systems on the ground, and one that seems set to increase in capability and be deployed on a greater number of platforms. Its presence or absence on battlefields around the world will remain both consequential and highly scrutinized.